And a very good evening to you, and welcome to this evening's edition of Politics 101. David Hines here, of course, with you. Would like to welcome all of you wherever you're joining us from, whether you're joining us from our homeland, Guyana, or you're joining us from outside of Guyana. I would like to welcome you all to Politics 101. And good evening to you if you're coming at us from Barbados. My good friend and neighbor, former neighbor, Yvonne from Barbados. Always early. Good evening to you, Yvonne. Good evening to all the Guyanese who were joining us from Barbados. Good evening to you if you're coming at us from the Bahamas. Good evening, and welcome to Politics 101. Good evening, those of you joining us from Grenada, the Spice Island, from St. Lucia, beautiful St. Lucia, one of my favorite Caribbean islands, and good evening to you. How about those of you in St. Vincent and the Grenadines? Welcome to Politics 101. I know quite a few of you are joining us from Antigua and Barbuda. Those of you who are in St. Martin. St. Martin, of course, is a place where lots of our people have settled and the people go back and forth. Welcome to Politics 101. Good evening to you coming at us from North America. Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, upstate New York. Welcome to Politics 101. If you're coming at us from Hartford, Connecticut, or out there in Massachusetts, people are stretching out, spreading out to those places. And a good evening to you who are coming to us from New Jersey, Jersey City. Sister Brenda Casey, I know, coming at us from Jersey City. Welcome to Politics 101. Good evening to you from Maryland, Virginia, Washington, D.C. It's always a pleasure to welcome you to Politics 101. Of course, one of the places that I have roots in Maryland, Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. Good evening to my mom. She's usually asleep by this time, sleeps very early, and but sometimes she stays up to watch her son, as she says. Good evening, Mommy, if you're watching. Good evening to my sisters and brothers. They're all there in Washington, D.C., Maryland area. I'm one of two of us who have strayed, if you will. Good evening to Politics 101. Sandra Facey is joining us from New York. I met a Facey in Atlanta. I met a Facey in Atlanta. I forgot her first name. And I know the Faceys are few and in between. I understand the family originated from Barbados. So it may be a cousin that I met there in Atlanta over the weekend. Good evening, Sandra. Marlon Seaford, good evening to you. It's always good to know where you're from, you know. It gives you a sense. Every community has a rhythm, and people take that rhythm with them wherever they go. I remember as a young man, I used to dance kwekwe. We had a group from Buxton called Tutashinda, and we used to travel up and down the coast dancing kwekwe. And I always remember when we went to West Bobis, of course, that was always special. But one of the places I remember going to was Firish. And there was a rhythm about Firish people that was unique to Firish Gibraltar area. Good evening to you up there on the Quarantine Coast. My good brother, Brother Morgan, from up there around the Union area. I love that area. I love Union area. When they years and years ago with a drama group from Buxton, and we went up there, and we used to stay in Manchester, and we would travel along the coast doing concerts, and I used to love it going to Union. Good evening. I noticed my sister Linda Campbell, Cookie, is watching from New Jersey. Cookie, my country woman. The good old days, the Cookies, they used to have a big party, annual party. All Buxtonians would turn up to that party in New Jersey. I don't know if they still have. Well, I know they don't have it anymore. You would go to the Cookie party in New Jersey and Punchy Party in New York. And then on Memorial Day weekend, all roads lead to Maryland, Washington, D.C., Bonnet Party. Those are Buxton fixtures. And it's good to see Linda Campbell, them Cookie, as we would say, from Buxton back damn side. Linda, I see your little sisters there more than I see you. They visit Guyana more often. Good evening to all Guyanese and non-Guyanese who are on the program. Number 51, Kim is saying her dad, Kim Walker is saying her dad was from, was from number 51 up there on the quarantine. Welcome to Politics 101. I'm going to be joined in a short while by the ever-present and effervescent Rickford Burke. Had the occasion to spend the weekend with him in Atlanta. Good evening, Atlanta. I know quite a few of you from Atlanta are watching, very much part of this program and other program. Grove Diamond new scheme. Grove Diamond new scheme, quite a thing. In the old days, you pass by Diamond, you're smelling sugar, the Diamond Sugar Estate. You start to smell that sugar off from a long way. I remember you traveling along the East Bank, going to the airport or going up to Linden, and when you get to Diamond, the sugar. But now Diamond is known not so much for the Sugar Estate, for the Diamond scheme. People are moving from all over the coast, and they're settling in the Diamond scheme. And notice she said the Diamond new scheme because there's an old Diamond scheme, Diamond new scheme. Good evening to all of you good people from the East Bank of Demerara. I as you all know, I just got back from Guyana, and God, the deplorable state of the East Bank Road. One would think that road, which is the road that would introduce people to Guyana, the main thoroughfare coming from the airport, it's in deplorable state. It's like they're forever doing work on that road. The understanding is that they're giving these works to contractors who do substandard work, and then they have to go back and do it again. But that road is in terrible shape. On both occasions, I had to travel there in the night. My son, driving me up and down, and luckily he knows the road, because them big holes and all that kind of story. If I were driving myself, I would not know I would make out on the East Bank Road. But they really need to get that road fixed, get a good contractor who can do good work, because that road is in very, very bad shape. I know many of you go home, you all go home often, so you all know what I'm talking about. Good evening to you. Good evening to you if you're joining us from Canada, Toronto. Of course, most of our people are there. People are spread out to other parts, Manitoba, Edmundston, Montreal, but the center where our people are, it's Ontario province, and in particular in particular Toronto and its environs. Good evening to all of you. Good evening to all of you there in Guyana, Georgetown, my own part of the world, East Coast, East Coast. Good evening to the much maligned but free people of Buxton Village. Good evening to you. Good evening to you, Buxtonians. Good evening to those of you in Anns Grove. We're coming. The WPA will be coming to Anns Grove with a public meeting on Sunday night. So if you're in the Anns Grove, Clumbrook, Beehive area, please turn out to that meeting. Good evening to all the good people of Enmore North, Enmore South, Enmore. Good evening to all of you, because some of you in our Indian Guyanese communities do watch the program. You're silent, and I'm differentiating between real people and the so-called trolls who are come on our program to make trouble. Good evening to you, Everett Leonard, Melissa Sue. Good evening. Good evening to you, Winston Kilkenny. Welcome to Politics 101. I'll be joined shortly joined by my brother, our brother, Rickford Burke. Good evening, Vibert White. Good evening, Vibert White. The man with lots of energy, and we need that energy. We need that energy. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Good evening, Atlanta, Georgia. Good evening. Those of you from the West Coast. How is my brother Ozia in South Carolina? Brother drove all the way to Atlanta to attend that meeting, and all those people who came there. And now with everybody can take their own picture. Lots of selfies and lots of pictures taken, and it was such a pleasure to be among people and feel welcomed and feel appreciated. People certainly appreciate what we are doing on these platforms in the evening and for the general struggle. Good evening, Linden. Good evening, Linden. Marielle, my good friend up there, we've got to touch base. The Society for African Guyanese Empowerment. We haven't met or done much in recent times, but we are going to revive that education thing that we started a few years that was interrupted by the COVID-19. We had worked out a program for giving lessons, online lessons, to students who are preparing for the various exams. We wanted to concentrate on African Guyanese students and others, and we are going to revive it. It was being organized by the Society for African Guyanese Empowerment, SAGE, and we were, of course, interrupted by the pandemic. But we do have it on the front burner to begin in the next school year. We had assembled teachers, volunteer teachers, to teach our young people online lessons, if you will. And there goes Marielle, who was one of the persons that worked with us herself, a wonderful teacher. Good evening to you. Good evening, Linden. We are going to get to Linden. Meaning the WPA will get to Linden for a public meeting shortly. Yesterday we came on air and we learned that they had denied permission for a march on International Day for the Elimination of Racism. The government denied permission for a march. Of course, we were speculating why. And I think the consensus is that they're afraid. Not afraid that we were going to commit violence or any of those things. They're afraid that we have exposed them, that they usually infiltrate these marches, set their thugs and goons in the marches as they did when those people were marching from Golden Grove. And they couldn't do that with the proposed march yesterday because they knew that we were prepared for them. We were prepared for them. And they knew they couldn't pull that off yesterday. So the next step was to deny us the right to march. And in denying us the right to march, what they were doing is that they were trying to prevent the world from seeing demonstrations on the streets of Guyana. They hated that. They hate that. They hate that. They hate that. They didn't want the world to see people marching and drawing attention to racism in Guyana. And so they denied the march. So they denied the marches for two reasons. One, they couldn't infiltrate the march because they knew we were going to be looking out for the infiltrators. And they weren't going to be able to charge another set of people for terrorism. And so they tried to other tactic, and that is to deny the march. Because they didn't want the world to see us marching. For the world to see demonstrations against racism in Guyana. And so they denied permission for the march. But in that denial, we have gained the victory. Because we are, in a sense, they're confessing that whenever these marches are on, they set their goons in the march. And that in this time of vigilance, we were not going to allow infiltrators into that march. They know that. They couldn't try that. And so they deny us the right to march. These are people who run around the place talking about what Burnham used to do and how Burnham was terrible and Burnham was this and Burnham was that. And look, these people are doing worse than what they are talking about Burnham. But politicians generally don't have too much shame. But this set of politicians, they are shameless to the bone. Good evening, Emily. Met Emily the other day in Buxton. There, she was at the meetings. Dennis Atwell, good evening, my brother. Good evening, good evening. Good evening, Marcel D'Oliveira. Welcome to Politics 101. I'll be joined by Rickford Burke. The terror. Look at what they did to Elton McRae, who also spoke on that platform at Buxton and exposed the way in which they're appropriating and misappropriating lands in Bedford-Acton. Sent in thugs to assault him. All of this in the democracy that they're talking about. See, they tried to pull a fast one on us. They define democracy in narrow terms, electoral democracy. That you hold elections every 5 years. And that is democracy for them. When they narrow democracy just to elections, it means they can do all that the autocratic rule and authoritarian rule and dictatorial rule in between elections. Because for them, elections are the beginning and the end of democracy. And so what happens in between elections, democracy doesn't work. dictatorship in between elections, and then they say we hold elections. If you hold elections and you manipulate and rig the elections before election day, you're not operating a democracy. Ravidev is the chief propagandist about this notion of democracy. That we must have elections and we see crossover votes and that's democracy. Ravidev is doing that. He's selling snake oil. He's the man that is selling that. Ravidev used to be a power sharer. All of us believe that what we did, what we should do to lower the temperature in Guyana is at the end of the elections, everybody get their share of the government. He has abandoned that. And he believes the solution to Guyana's problems is to get crossover votes. So Indians will govern with a few black votes, and blacks will govern with a few Indian votes. That is how he sees the future of Guyana now. And he's been trying to sell us that snake oil, but we're not buying it. The solution to Guyana is when Africans get their share, Indians get their share, Amerindians get their share, and the other ethnic groups. They get their share of the economic pie and the share of their political pie. We're not buying no snake oil, Ravi. Because you're only selling that snake oil to us. You see, some of these brothers and sisters, they believe that the PPP will be in power forever and forevermore. In the old days, they had a built-in majority ethnic group. Indian Guyanese were over 50% of the population. Now, Indian Guyanese are below 50% of the population, but they make up for that loss by thieving votes from the 200,000 extra votes on the voter list. The voters list has over 200,000 more there. And so the PPP has lost the inbuilt majority. So they are now thieving from the extra 200,000 to make up that majority. While they try to tell us we must try to get crossover votes. But the votes that are crossed over to us have already been crossed over. We have Indian Guyanese and Amerindians. I suppose they're not thinking about Amerindians. We have Indian Guyanese who are in the opposition parties. They've already crossed over. But while they're telling us about crossover, they're dipping their hands in that 200,000 extra votes. And all they need is an extra 5,000, 10,000 votes. And they were able to steal that in 2020. That is why they don't want the petitions to be heard. But we're not buying Ravidev's snake oil. We're not buying it. Let Ravidev go and sell the snake oil to the PPP. We're not buying snake oil. And we believe in elections. As I said this morning, on the Bostonian Guyanese Morning Time that we are preparing for elections. But we want to make it clear, we are preparing for free and fair elections, not crooked elections. Elections where the playing field is leveled. Those 200,000 extra votes have to come off the voters list. We have to have biometrics and other means of ensuring that people don't vote more than once. I want to remind them that in 2020, the PPP never accused the opposition of having their people vote multiple times. They never accused us of that. They didn't find boxes that were tampered with in the strongholds of the coalition. They didn't find boxes without statutory documents in the strongholds of the coalition. All these sins that were committed were found in PPP strongholds. They talk about recount. The coalition asked for a recount in Region 3. They didn't grant it. All they were concerned with was Region 4. Because they knew they tampered with the boxes in Region 4. They knew. They knew that most of the voter impersonations occurred in Region 4. And so they were telling us, look at Mr. Mingo, look at Mr. Mingo. And while the diplomats and the media and everybody were looking at Mr. Mingo, the crime was being committed in the boxes. And so when the boxes were opened and the real evidence came out, they pretend that the recount never happened. But we are not going to allow them to get away with that. My guest is here. Good evening, Brother Rickford.
Good evening, Doctor. Good to see you again. I'm doing well. Back in New York.
Right. Well, I want to start tonight by asking you to give the audience an idea of what happened in Atlanta this past weekend. It's good to see it on social media. It's another thing to be there. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, we had an enthusiastic Guyanese audience. We were overwhelmed by the response. I know you were too. You were there in person. Guyanese felt relieved to hear from us in person, get information firsthand, identify with us, demonstrate solidarity with us in person. People were very concerned about what's going on in Guyana. As a matter of fact, I find people in Atlanta are a little more militant than us here in New York. The people in Atlanta were very angry. They demonstrated their anger about the situation, the attacks, the racism in Guyana. Persons want to get involved. They ask how they get involved. They pledge to get involved. They were very passionate about their concerns and their opinions. And I think people are committed to going back to Guyana to try to help our family and friends and brothers and sisters back home. People are concerned about the crackdown on free speech, freedom of association, freedom of assembly, and people are committed with a sense of determination that they will be contacting the elected officials here and the United States government to have some sort of change in with regard to U.S. policy in Guyana. But we had a very, very passionate, energetic group of people in Atlanta.
Rickford Burke there giving us an update on what took place.
And also, if I might add,
yes,
while I was in Atlanta, I did several interviews on the radio. I did a TV interview. People, Caribbean Americans, are concerned in Atlanta as well about their brothers and sisters in Guyana. So I want the people of Guyana watching to know that you're not alone. There's solidarity, there's camaraderie, there's friendship, there's concern, and there's determination to bring relief to the people of Guyana from not only Guyanese, but Caribbean Americans. Even Sunday night before I left, I went to a gathering with a Trinidadian event with lots of people from the Caribbean, and everybody was talking about Guyana and what they heard is happening to Guyana, to the African Guyanese community in Guyana. And I know it's word is getting out, the message is spreading, even though the government controlled the media. As a matter of fact, you notice in the report, the U.S. State Department Human Rights Report on Guyana for 2022, the State Department highlighted that the government monopolized the press and didn't give opposition an ability to get their message out through the state media, even though the media is owned by the people of Guyana.
And that's U.S. State Department report continues to describe the government as installed. That was quite instructive. Many people are crediting that term, the installed government, to the opposition, but it's the American State Department that first said the government was installed. They haven't said the government was an elected government. And they use that word installed again.
I think they use install and then they use sworn in as well in the report.
Right.
They've never said elected. You're right. They've never said elected.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Rickford, you gave us that update on the Atlanta meeting. And of course, you yourself and others in New York have organized meetings like that in the past. Tell our audience why we must continue to organize meetings like those. How those meetings are helping the struggle in Guyana.
Well, the government controlled the media. The government controlled the media. The government's ethnic hegemony controls about 98% of the media in Guyana. And they suppress news. They suppress the racism. They suppress information about the atrocities that the government and its agents are committing. And so we have to get information out. We have to get information out. We have to create awareness about what is going on. But also we have to meet the diaspora, talk with them, mobilize them, get their involvement, let them write to their elected official. That's how change comes. I was a child, but I remember the campaign the PPP waged about free and fair elections. Someone reminded me just the other day. Everything was about free and fair elections. Dr. Jagan went everywhere, to the U.S. State Department, to the British House, to everywhere, all over London, Brussels, the United States, Canada, and he waged that campaign for free and fair elections. We have to wage that very campaign against racism, racial discrimination, marginalization, victimization, and subjugation of Black people and opposition supporters. But this is worse, because you have not only economic genocide, they're shutting us out from participating in the development of the country. They want to shut us out from political representation. They want to establish a one-party dictatorial state. But in addition to that, they're using, which makes it an apartheid government, they're using law enforcement, the police, to enforce their racism, to enforce their apartheid policies, to marginalize people, to bring the African Guyanese population under subjugation. Also, a new thing, they're now using law enforcement and the instruments of the state to law enforcement instruments of the state and international conventions to pursue critics abroad. That's a new thing, and I intend to fight them for it. They'll cut it out. I've met with the FBI several times. I'm not going to disclose the content of my discussions with them and their investigation, but I think some people in Guyana are in danger of being prosecuted in the United States. I met with a prosecutor today, and they told me they have a clear-cut case, a clear case of crime by Guyana government officials. And anybody who wants to understand what is going on, they can go to the U.S. Justice Department website and look for Transnational Repression and Accountability Act. And if you read that, if you were to read that act, Dr. Hinds, let me tell you what the act talks about. And it says it's unlawful. Threats and intimidation against citizens by foreign government of their citizens abroad. The types of threat, this is the law. The law describes the types of threats. In-person threats, in-person verbal attacks, phone threats, electronic messages, threats through the media, cyber attack. And it outlines the people who the law is intended to protect. And it talks about dissidents, political opponents, journalists, persons who are human and other rights activists, all of these things. And then it outlines the crimes: hacking, threatening them, disinformation campaign, attacking them in the media, using government resources to coerce them to return home. All of this. And when I met with the prosecutor today, they were like, we were able to come up with this file, Dr. Hinds, a big file, and they collected all the evidence, and let's see where it goes. But they told me they have a clear-cut case of a prosecution, a successful prosecution.
Brother Rickford Burke there of CGID, tireless worker on behalf of Guyana and the Guyanese people in the diaspora. Welcome to all of you and good evening. I notice again tonight you're out in your great numbers, and it's always good to see so many of you. So many.
Dr. Hinds, sorry, someone is asking me here to repeat what I just said. Can I do that?
Sure, you can.
Okay, so it's called the Transnational Repression and Accountability and Prevention Act. And it's a federal law in the United States. And it says, some countries' government harass, intimidate their own citizens living in the United States. These government may also target citizens, permanent residents, and others in the United States. It is unlawful. And it says, what is transnational repression crimes? Stalking, harassing, hacking, assaulting, attempting to kidnap, forcing or coercing victims to return to their home, threatening, detaining family members at home or in other countries, online disinformation campaign. Who are the targets? Political human rights activists, dissidents, journalists, political opponents, religious or ethnic minorities, and it goes on. And it describes what the crimes are and the penalties and all of that. So I think the Attorney General of Guyana is in trouble.
Perfect. Good evening to all of you who are joining us. Yvonne, Danielle, good evening to all of you. Karen, welcome. Glenford Gordon, welcome to Politics 101. Those of you who join us from New York, the tri-state area, New Jersey, welcome. Atlanta, South Carolina.
New York in the house.
They're all in the house tonight. And look, tomorrow night, we are going to have one of the martyrs of our present revolution on. And I'm talking about Robin Simon. Look, they don't know what they're playing with. They don't know what they're playing with. We are going to turn that sister into a martyr of this revolution, because it's a revolution that we're fighting. We're fighting to change our country fundamentally in this era of oil. And part of that fundamental change is to remove the P and the PPP from government. And we are mobilizing to do that. And if they think they're going to lock up, our people to criminalize them. We are going to turn those who they're calling criminals into martyrs. And that sister, as I said before, I frequented Golden Grove after Quindon Bacchus was shot. That sister was organizing prayer meetings. She was organizing vigils. She was organizing food for people to eat. She was organizing marches to where the young man was killed. She was busy doing God's work and the work on behalf of that young man. And they dare to charge her, try to criminalize her. Well, we are going to turn the criminals into martyrs. Into martyrs. And that is what we mean when we say to them, stop, stop, because we are coming for you, PPP. And we are reminding you, Mr. PPP, that there is life, political life after the PPP. You're a bully, and bullies need the treatment that you give to bullies. And you put your hand on other African Guyanese. There will be consequences. As we have said, our brother Takumo Gunse is waiting for you all to put your hands and charge him.
Dr. Hines, I want to say this about Robin Simon. I've been observing this case. I know Robin's family very well. Her family is rooted in the PNC. I know them very well. Matter of fact, some of her relative or one of her relatives was a member of parliament.
Who's on this live tonight?
Right.
She's on here every night.
Yes. I specifically discussed this matter when I was having a discussion with our elected officials. The PPP is going to destroy Guyana. I can tell.
They're trying to.
Well, in the sense, we're not going to allow them to destroy our people. But I tell you what, I know that there are members of Congress waiting to act. And they are not only members of Congress, members of the executive branch as well. They're doing an assessment of what nonsense the Attorney General has been saying. They know it's nonsense, but they're prepared to impose the harshest penalties on the government of Guyana. And if they do that, it's going to destroy the economy. And it's going to destroy the oil and gas sector or set it back. So I'm not sure who is advising the PPP, but that woman is not a terrorist. She's not a criminal. They're criminalizing Black leaders who organize against them, who speak out against them, and they're charging them with terrorism. I'm not sure what laws, under what law they're charging these people with terrorism, but that's not terrorism.
But Brother Rickford, you know that they're not interested in winning a case.
Right.
They just want to bring charges on people to criminalize them and to drive fear in the rest of us. That's their tactic. And that is why I'm saying we are turning their prisoners into martyrs. And Robin Simon is going to be on here tomorrow night. We're going to make her the biggest martyr of our struggle, because that's what we have to do. When they move one way, we move the other way. The crime is when we do not respond to them. And that is the significance of what Brother Takumo Gunse and the WPA did. And that is to respond to them in an affirmative way. An affirmative way. Put the reputation of an established party on the line and said, we are prepared to go to jail. We are prepared to risk our life and liberty so that you will stop. And that is what has happened in Guyana in the last 2 weeks.
But I also want to warn members of the Guyana Police Force that they can be held accountable internationally for what they're doing. Robin Simon is not only Guyanese. That's all I would say to them. She's not only Guyanese. And there's interest here by the United States elected officials about what has happened to her because she's not only Guyanese. That's all I would say. And I noticed that the government, they have been rocked hard by the U.S. report, by the racism allegations that have been proven, and in the face of the most profound evidence of racism, and that the government is the most racist and oppressive in the Caribbean region or in the Western Hemisphere, they've now embarked on a campaign, a PR campaign to gaslight people and to pretend to the world that they're not racist. They have all of these ministers like Nigel Darmlal and even the president himself and Susan Rodriguez and Gail Teixeira and Mr. Ben, putting out all of these little flyers with making statements about inclusiveness. The PPP is not an inclusive government. The PPP is an apartheid government, so that's not going to work.
Brother Rickford, the news, the good news, as the Christians would say, the good news is that we are making them do it.
Yes.
We are making them do it. They're not responding to themselves. They're responding because we have exposed their asses. And so they're responding. The WPA on Sunday night was in Victoria. This Saturday, you know what? 11 ministers are going into Victoria. We are making them do it. If the people of Victoria can benefit from their going in there, so be it. I am not sure that the people of Victoria will benefit. I think they're taking a minstrel show into Victoria. But the fact that we are making them make themselves fools, it means we are winning.
It's a circus.
Yes, we are bringing the circus on the road. And we are controlling the narrative now. If we were responding to them before 2 Thursdays ago, now they are responding to us. That is the good news. All the work that you have been doing, all the work that all of us have been doing, when Ogunse took to that stage, he took all of our energies and he made one statement and it changed the game. Now we are no longer complaining. We are no longer complaining. We are piling it on. We are piling it on. It's different now. Our people are educated about the PPP. Thanks to you. Thanks to Ben Shop. Thanks to all the other brothers and sisters on social media. Our people are educated. What we have to do is to turn that education now into action. And that's what we're doing. That's what we did in Atlanta. We are now talking action talk, not just complaining. Action talk. Action talk. You see, when you say civil disobedience and non-cooperation, why is that by? Where it coming from? I wonder if it coming from Golden Grove. I wonder if it coming from Springlands. I wonder if it coming from Enmore and Port Morant. They don't know, because we are saying to people there is such a thing as self-activity. Self-activity. You don't have to call Aubrey Norton and tell him how you're going to engage in civil disobedience. You don't have to call me or call you. Right? That is the righteous, subversive nature of civil disobedience. Mahatma Gandhi used it. Jenny Jagan used it. And we are just giving the PPP back some of their medicine. We are going to be burning cane fields as they did. We are not going to be bringing our produce to Georgetown, sell enough to get back what we spend and dump the rest so that opposition supporters could. I lived through that. I know the PPP civil disobedience. Our civil disobedience is another kind of civil disobedience which they can't read. And my brother, Rex Nettleford, he says, when people are oppressed, they disappear to places where the oppressor cannot find them. And that's what we are encouraging our people to do. Engage in self-activity, coming from a place where the oppressor cannot see you. Our singers must now sing against racism. Our dramatists must now write plays and act plays against racism. This is what we have to do. Artists have to come out and join this struggle. Yes, we like to jam and wine, and we like to shake bumsy and so on. There is place for that. But now we have to shake more than our bumsy, our bamsy, or whatever they call it, backball. We have to do more than backball. All right? And I'm making a call to our calypsonians and other singers. Even if you don't want to sing it, give somebody else let us sing it. Who's brave enough to sing it? We've got to fight them on the stage. We've got to fight them at the workplace. We have to fight them overseas. We have to fight them at the back dam. We have to fight them when we are in their faces too.
Yes, we have to awake the social consciousness of everybody.
There we go. There you go. Brother, you have been a thorn in their side. You've been a thorn in their side for good reason. For good reason. And not everybody is going to do it like you do it. But you are, of course, inspiring people. I go to Guyana often, and I know what people are saying about the work that you are doing. And so I just want to keep encouraging you to do what you are doing, because you're a Christian. I know that you're doing God's work, but you're also doing your people's work. Some of us have been put down on this earth to fight in broad daylight. Some of us have been put here to fight behind the scenes. We've got to fight wherever and however. My brother Walter Rodney used to say, if a man can just lift 1 pound, let him come in the struggle and lift this pound. And those of us who can lift an extra pound, we're going to lift 26 pounds instead of 25. And everyone is part of this struggle. And I want to say thanks to you. Thanks to you on behalf of my fellow Guyanese for doing what you are doing. Political correctness is not always correct. And people may feel that you are not politically correct. And as I said, political correctness is not always correct. It is about building this quilt of resistance. Different colors on that quilt. I remember the 1988 speech by Jesse Jackson when he was running for president. And he used the image of the quilt to describe his rainbow coalition. And we have to ensure that we continue to ask God to bless people like you, not because we believe in leaderism, but we believe in people who are example of courage, example of fortitude, example of fearlessness. The issue, Rickford, arose in the PNC when some of our Indian brothers, and I want to say, I don't know Siram well, I don't know Natasha well, I see her, she's a very pleasant young lady. I've talked to Siram a couple of times and he's a very pleasant young man. I like Ganesh. I think Ganesh is quite articulate, and he will make a good politician as he gains more experience. I love Ubraj Narayan. I think he did something that was unparalleled when he laid down on the road for black people, because those were black things. But what I also saw when he was taken into custody and passed through court, it was black people who were in front of that court. It was black women who marched with him from the court back to City Hall. But those three brothers and that sister put out a statement after remarks made by Sister Rhonda Lane, a native activist, an organic activist, who, quoting from a reading of history, described the living conditions of Indian Guyanese before they arrived here. And of course, some Indian people understandably felt that it was insensitive. And I suppose Ganesh and the others felt it was insensitive. But then they proceed without, I imagine they could not have had much, much consultation, because this thing happened on Friday night, and so on Thursday night. By Saturday they were out with a statement. And in a sense, as I said, threw Rwanda not under the bus. They threw her into the prisons of the PPP. It wasn't the PPP who went through the meeting and found that statement. It was these brothers who found it. And when they called me, when Ganesh called me, and he called me, I want to say that, he called me early on Saturday morning. I couldn't get to the phone because I was traveling. And as soon as I got to a port, I called him back. He told me what the issue was. I gave him all the satisfaction, you know. And I thought that that would have held their hand from putting out the statement, because I felt it was not their righteous indignation was the problem, but to put out a statement like that at a time when we are tripping the PPP over, and to do it to an ordinary working class woman who makes selfless sacrifices. Sometimes he leaves Denhamsted with one side passage to come to town, to go to Buxton, wherever to protest. And you did that to her. I find that it was unfortunate and it should not be done. What's your view on that development?
Well, Daniel Siram is my brother. We have a very good relationship. So too is Ubraj, and so too is Ganesh. Natasha is my sister. Gita and I have a very cordial, good relationship. I thought that the state, and I spoke to Ubraj, I spoke to Ganesh about it. I didn't get a chance to talk with the others about it as yet. They know my views. I thought the statement was a mistake. Of course, everybody has a right to their opinion. Everybody has a right to feel however they feel. We can't determine how people should express their feelings. But as politicians, they're all elected officials. And I think if you're an elected official, you have a certain responsibility. And your responsibility doesn't only lie with your own belief and your own values. You represent people. You represent thousands of people. And in expressing yourself, you have to give thought to that. I didn't think it was well thought out. It is fine to express your views. It is fine to have an opinion, but they should be well thought out. And as public officials, it should be strategic. I thought that if they wanted to express a view on the statement, it should have come from the party and not from 4 East Indian members of the party. They should have given the party an ability to assess the situation in its totality, in consideration of their views, and issued a statement that is a balanced statement that represents the party's values, represents their opinions as members of the party or as leaders of the party. Because they have to remember that if you go too far, you're going to fracture relationships on the other side. And that is what happened. The statement was too harsh. I think the statement lent to the perception of a segregated section in the party. And that is not wholesome for the well-being of the coalition, the APNU PNC coalition. And they are leaders themselves. They're leaders themselves. I understand their passion and their zeal and desire to express a view. And there's nothing wrong with that. I didn't disagree with them doing that. What I thought it should have been in a more strategic way that would have been helpful, that would become an object lesson for the nation, that the PNC could express a view that reflects their East Indian members, because we're all a family, right? They're all a family. And the family was hurting, family members were hurting, and they wanted to express a view. But it speaks widely to factionism in the PNC. I think it's unacceptable to see leaders fighting among themselves when the people's work has to be done. The party represents a large section of the country. It's the largest political party in the opposition. And we have people fighting left, right, and center in the public. The PNC has, sorry, the PPP has problems. They have significant differences between Jagdev faction, Jagan faction, Nanlal faction, Bharat's faction, Irfan's faction, but we don't see it. And it's affecting the support base. People are disappointed. People feel that there's not enough strength in the party. Everybody is not coming and brace forward to push against the PPP. We have people pulling at each other. It's counterproductive. Sometimes I feel they're firing in a circular firing squad rather than firing at the PPP. And I think this gave the impression to me and some others that that's part of it. I could be wrong, but I know for sure that statement should have come from the party. We don't want Amerindians putting out statements, Afro-Guyanese from West Coast putting out statements, Afro-Guyanese from Linden putting out statements, Douglas people putting out statements, or mixed race people putting out statements, Chinese, Guyanese in the coalition putting out statements, Portuguese. It's a whole. It's an organization that is made up of a diverse group of Guyanese. And it must speak as one whenever there are these issues. So I thought that was a mistake. I hope that they've learned from it. We want inclusiveness. You can't presume that an organization is not going to do something. You have to take it to the organization, and they're leaders of the organization. And as leaders of the organization has a responsibility to listen to them because they have constituents, they have family members. And I can say that Daniel has family members, Ganesh has family members, Natasha has family members. I'm pretty sure that don't always agree with them, who wants them to represent their views as well. And the party has to take that into consideration. And so I think that there should be a retreat in the PNC or the APNU, and they should discuss these matters, have a one strategy, work on fostering unity. I want to see President Granger, Joe Harmon, Amna Ali, everybody embrace the party. I want to see the party leadership embrace these people. It is time to put every ounce of disagreement aside, come together and work for the good of the country. We will only defeat the PPP if we're together. And one of the reasons why the coalition lost is because they were so divided. They went into that elections divided, with all sorts of feelings or whatever it is. And once you're not together, David Granger was doing one thing, his cabinet was doing one thing, even during the recount. Granger did his own thing without consultation. Listen, Dr. Hines, I'm very passionate about this issue of unity in the party, because I served as the special assistant to the leader of the PNC. I worked with the president of Guyana, PNC president. At a very young age, I worked with a PNC minister. I know government. I know how a political party should function. I know how important unity is to a political movement. And if you don't have the components of these things, of a political movement, unity, a good team, good teamwork, everybody working together, competence, we're going to have defeat. We're going to have defeat. So I want to urge my friends in the PNC, put their differences aside. Leadership, embrace everybody. Leaders of the party, embrace the leadership. Let us come together. Now is the time for everybody to come together, work together, and target the PPP, defeat the PPP, not each other.
Not each other. And I noticed Brother Ganesh on Brother Mark's program the other night, and he was referring to Mark being on an earlier program. And Mark kept saying, it said Dr. Hines. And he didn't. The only time he called my name was to say that neither Mark nor I can push him to think what we want to think. I want to say to Brother Ganesh, you are still my brother. You will always be my brother. I understand the courage that it takes as an Indian Guyanese to become part of an African Guyanese party, African Guyanese dominated party. I know it calls for tremendous courage. And like I said, I have tremendous respect for Ganesh. I think he's one of the young persons in Guyana who's going to be developing into an effective politician. But our young political people have to learn the art of politics. They have to learn the instincts of their people. I said on this program that there are many people in our community who feel Indians who belong to the PNC are really not with us. They're there as spies for the PPP and so on, and vice versa. I know there are Indians who feel the blacks in the PPP are not there. They're only there to get some soup, and that they're really not the thing. And when you don't act with caution and so on, when you are in that situation that Ganesh and them are, you easily feed that myth. Because I'm saying it's a myth. I know it's a myth that people like Ganesh and so are spies to the PPP and so on. But when you do what you did there the other day by putting out that statement against an ordinary working class woman, then working class people are going to say, you see, we can't trust these people. You see, and giving life, if you will, to a myth. But I want to say here tonight, Ganesh, my Paul, Ubraj Narayan, Sister Natasha, and Brother Daniel Siram, I commend you all for the courage you all have shown in belonging to a party that in your community is seen as the devil. And I want to say, despite my disagreement, not in expressing your views, but in how you put it out into the public, despite that, I do not feel less of you all today than I did yesterday. And I want to say that I always, as a black man, whenever Indians on our side get into trouble, I feel that my voice must be loudest.
Exactly.
My voice must be loudest. Because you all are making a sacrifice also for me and people of my kind. And if I can pass that principle over to some of the young politicians, don't play around with race. Race is a real thing, and it's a delicate thing, but don't play around with it. And there are duties, if you're political people, that you must adhere to. And one of them is when your brother of another race is in trouble. Whatever you feel about him, that's the time to hold him tightly and not throw him over to the enemy. Always remember that, And I'm going to end with this, Brother Ganesh. I'm going to say two things. When Sister Amanza was charged by the PPP with making an insensitive statement, you all didn't come out with a public statement. And you all were correct not to come up with a public statement. But now you all come out with a public statement against a black woman, a black working class woman, selective outrage. Ganesh, you all were right with Amanza. You all were wrong with the public thing against Sister Rhonda. And let me say one more thing, and you'll come in, brother. I also want to say that we have to understand the enemy thrives on our disunity, whether it's party disunity or opposition disunity. And if Aubrey Norton had denounced Ogunse, they might have gotten Ogunse in jail by now. Because what they want was the opposition leader to denounce Ogunse, and then they would read it as Norton agreeing with them, thus leaving WPA and Ogunse out there to be devoured by the wolves. And I think Brother Norton expressed political maturity, political courage, because I know some people in the party didn't want him to do that. And one has to commend people when they take the correct stance. You may disagree with them on 100 and other things, but you want to correct them. So let me say to you, Brother Ganesh, that despite this little disagreement on the publicity thing, I recognize the work that you all have done. Even if you all don't do no footwork in the PNC, just being in the PNC itself is a tremendous value. And Ganesh, I'm going to call you, and I hope you answer the phone. I know you're listening tonight. I know you're listening.
He will answer.
I too big, Ganesh, to all malice. And I want, when I see you, I'm going to ring your ears and say, don't be managed with your big brothers and your big sisters. If you vex with me, don't say the show you were on earlier. Say, Dr. Hines show, that's why you just call me. And so I'm going to call you, and when I meet you, I'm going to ring your ears and say, whatever you may feel about what I said in that statement, you must get respect for big people. All right, come in.
I want to say two things with regard to Indians being in the party. As a teenager, I was at a teenage age, in my late teens, I was in the highest leadership of the GYSM. I joined when I was 16. By the time I reached 18, I was the national chairman of the GYSM. And I recall Indians in the party. Half the PNC was Indian. I don't understand where this thing come from now that the PNC is a black people party, so to speak. Listen, when I was growing up under Desmond Hoyt, there were about 5, well, on the Burnham that I read, there were 5 East Indian vice presidents under Burnham. But under Desmond Hoyt, the cabinet was 8 and 8. You had 8 blacks and 8 Indians. When I was growing up, the general secretary of the PNC was East Indian, Shiram Prashad. And then you had I think Dr. Patrick McKenzie, and then Aubrey Norton, and then Amna Ali. There might have been somebody in between that I'm missing. But there was always, the cabinet was always half and half. Damde Shaw, Gulkaran Sharma, Rabi and Ali Kok. So many ministers, Vice President Steve Narayan, Vice President Ranjit Chandra Singh, Kami Ram Sarup. The Indians were equally dominant in the PNC all the time. So I'm not sure where this perception coming from that the Indians shouldn't be in the party. Indians have always been in the party. Indians were equal. There was equity and inclusiveness in the PNC government. Now you spoke about selective outrage, and I'm listening to this makeup outrage, fabricated outrage against the sister you spoke about, and against Takuma Ugunse. I want to know, where are these people when Bar Jagdeo were making all these statements? Bar Jagdeo went to Berbice, to Albion, and told East Indian people that GDF officers are kicked down the door criminals. He said, when the army officers kick down your door, who's going to protect you? Where is the outrage from the army leadership? Where's the outrage from the East Indian hegemony? Where's the outrage from Starbrook News that an Indian man who's an opposition leader can go to Albion and tell East Indian people that the black men in the army are criminals going to kick down their door? Where is the outrage for that? Where's the outrage when Bar Jagdeo stood up in the middle of Georgetown and told his supporters that when they got into power, they would target police officers and their families? And their families. Where's the outrage for that? Where's the outrage when Bar Jagdeo said they're going to target GCOM workers, target public servants, and their families? God, I wish he touched my family. Where is the outrage when Bar Jagdeo told his East Indian supporters in Berbice, when David Granger comes to their village, the president of the country, to chase him out? He was inciting not only racial hostility, but violence against the president of Guyana. Where was the outrage? Let them give me a break.
Rickford Burke there, laying it out as we do on these programs, laying it out. Tomorrow night, Robin Simon is going to be on, the martyr, one of the martyrs of our present revolutionary moment. She's going to be on tomorrow night. Let's say get well to Brother Elton McCrae, who was assaulted by goons obviously sent by the other side to beat him up. If he's well enough, we're going to have him here on Friday night, sorry, if he's well. But these people are going to stop at nothing unless we stop them. And we have begun to stop them. Know that we have not won the victory yet, but we are winning small victories. It's not always what they do, but what you prevent them from doing. It's not always what you do, it's what you prevent them from doing. And we've drawn a line in the sand. That sand that our bones and our blood are mixed in 400 years and more. And so we are saying there's a line in the sand. Not one drop of black blood after now. There will be consequences. There will be consequences, not one drop of black blood. And if you go about arresting our people and charging them for terrorism, there will be consequences. One of the consequences, we're going to turn each of those terrorists into a martyr of the revolution. We're going to hold them up, not just to Guyana, but to the world, and let the world see what wicked politicians you all are. You are going to pay. You are going to pay in the most public way for what you are doing. And we also want to remind the zealots who are allowing themselves to be used for a mess of pottage, for a few pennies, that there's life after the PPP. Those laws that you all are using, or are you all not thinking that when you all are gone, they will be on the books? I may have to beg the new government not to engage in recriminations, not to engage in the politics of spite. I may have to beg for you all, because our people are going to demand that their government, their new government, do to you all what you all are doing to us now. They're going to remember that between 2015 and 2020, the government had evidence on you all and did nothing. Thank God for them. And this time around, they're going to be under pressure. You all will call David Hines and say, where is David Hines now that the government is charging me for terrorism? You all will want me. Stop it now. There is life after the PPP. And I tell you, when you all mash people up, beat people up, they're not going to go down at the bottom of the ocean. They're going to become more radicalized. And it will work against you. And when the new government comes in, that radical instinct is going to say to the new government, do them what they did to us. And you're all going to be calling me and Rickford.
They're not going to call me. Dr. Hines, and let me say this: any new government that goes into power will not be seeking revenge, will be obeying the law. These guys are breaking the law. You have senior police officers framing people, breaking the law. They think that we don't know. We know exactly what is happening. I know everything well, not everything, but I know a lot what goes on at the police headquarters. I know about the conspiracies. Right? We get the evidence all the time. A police officer flew to this country, met me right here in Queens, and then flew back to Guyana to bring evidence for us to give to the congressman, give to the FBI about what is happening in the Guyana police force. Now, for instance, I have said unapologetically that some of them should have to run out of the country for fear of prosecution. Nana said it. He said that black people got to run in the opposition, must run out of the country, right? These people are afraid. I cannot imagine that the United States government has normal relations with a country that commits such atrocities. Knowingly, there are people at the United States Embassy who know the atrocities. Police officers are framing people. The United States report, Human Rights Report of 2022, says the government and police commit extrajudicial killings. And the United States government has normal relations with the government of Guyana. I cannot reconcile it, because you have the United States government punishing countries all around the world for these kinds of things. There's a disconnect. The Congress knows what's going on, but there's this disconnect between the executive branch of the United States government, the disconnect between what Congress people are saying and the silence of the embassy. And we are dedicated in CGID to changing that. There must be a change in the United States posture towards the PPP government. It has to be. And I want to tell everybody living in the United States, the government of Guyana has applied to US Exim Bank for a $13 billion loan for this gas to shore project. Not one single Black business is in that project. Not one Black person will benefit from that project. And under the United States laws, procurement laws, President Biden has said it. A certain percent of this money procurement must be done through minority businesses. So if the United States government has a policy where minority businesses must benefit from government spending, the United States government has to ensure that their values are respected in their foreign policy. And so the United States government has to make sure that if they're giving or lending Guyana 13 billion taxpayer dollars, that the values of the United States is respected in the spending of that money. It therefore means that the United States must first ensure that Black people, Black contractors are also contracted for that project. And Black people must benefit from it as well, or else it shouldn't be given. And that's one of the campaign that we're raging right now. We want the United States government to examine. We don't want to hold back development for the country or starve Guyana for resources, but they must block that loan until they ensure that the government is not engaged in racism and racial discrimination against Black people, and also that the Black contractors will benefit from contracts from that money. We must make sure that. And the government mustn't say it. We want to see it on paper. We want to see it executed.
Rickford Burke, they're calling us to action. Rickford, my brother, thank you so much for coming on tonight.
Thank you for having me.
As usual, I shall be calling you back sooner rather than later. Thank you so much, my brother. And good night to Takuma Ogunse, brother Takuma, with love, Politics 101, with love, with much love for our audience. Good night to you, brother Takuma. Good night to you, brother Takuma. We have wrapped our arms around you. You will be on Politics 101 shortly. You will be on Politics 101 shortly. We'll announce when you will be on, but you will be on shortly. Tomorrow night, another martyr of our revolution, our present revolution, Robin Simon, the woman who spearheaded, or one of the spearheads of the protests in Golden Grove after Quindon Bacchus was murdered. She has now been charged for terrorism. Well, we are transforming her from terrorist to martyr. The martyr will be on tomorrow night, Robin Simon. Until tomorrow night, as usual, I leave you all with so much love, because love is a thing that is not in short supply among God's children. Love is a thing that is not in short supply among the darkest of us. Love is a thing that is not in short supply among those of us who feel that all of us have a place in Guyana. And not just a place, but an equal place in Guyana. Love is the watchword. Tonight, I leave you with an abundance of love.